I'm psychologist Dr. Bryan Violet, and today I'll be sitting down with Jim and Regina Donahue. This is the full episode of our conversation. They're my longtime friends, a married couple, and parents of six children. In the Catholic world, that's not a big deal. In the non-Catholic world, it's a very big deal. We'll be talking about sports fandom, male-female differences, our Sinner in a movie, Catch Me If You Can, and lots of other topics. This is the Catholic Sinner Show. But again, I really appreciate you guys doing this. You said this gives you life?
Yeah, I love this.
Regina?
You know that I used to work in TV many moons ago.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I also didn't know that you're Native American.
Only in some billboards in some neighborhoods.
That took me a second. So when I was a child, I actually would get jobs cast as a Native American.
Is that true?
Yes, that's true.
That would not happen today.
No, not anymore. Not anymore.
What a great joke that was.
It was well timed.
Yeah. So, when I was thinking about scheduling guests for the show, and you guys came to mind, and I've been reflecting on the fact that you guys came to mind because we haven't actually seen each other in person for 8 years. Mm-hmm. We've had about 4 phone calls between now and then. Every time we get on the phone, they're long phone calls. They're deep, they're substantive phone calls. And we spent 2 years together in a master's program at what is now DMU, Divine Mercy University, but it was IPS at the time. And I just marvel a bit at the fact that we're still friends. What do you
picks up where it left off? That happens.
And it does. And it's rare. Why do you think it happens? Have you ever thought through why this happens? Like why there's a connection with some people more than others?
It was only 2 years too. It's not like, we were friends for 15 years. It was like 2 years, which is crazy to think about. But I think it was so intense what we were doing. Mm-hmm. A lot of like airing of grievances with what we were studying or relating on topics. But there was definitely some late nights, long time spent together.
And you were also our friend and one of our first mutual friends that we made when we were in our early married life. You were with us during our first pregnancy. We were married for 3 months when we met you.
Yeah.
It was our first
well, it's interesting. You go away from home. It's almost like when you first go to college and you're away from your family. And it wasn't college, it was graduate school for us. But I was away. It was the second time I was away from my family. And we're so built for family that we made our own. Yep. Like I felt like you guys were family right away. I was thinking about how I was in your house a week after your first child was born.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Like what an honor to be invited into one of the most fragile times in your life. You guys were figuring out.
We needed you.
You guys were figuring out how to be parents. Now, I don't know if you figured it out since, but at that point, you were wrestling. Jim, I remember you said, I'll never forget this. You said, everything pointed toward me becoming a dad, and I didn't realize it until now. And now this is who I'm meant to be. Do you remember saying that?
I don't remember saying something like that. That sounds amazing. I'm so glad I said that. That's why we need friends to remember stuff like that. I usually don't say anything that good.
I never forgot it because I hadn't had a kid at that point, and I was thinking about the transition for myself and becoming a dad. And I always remember that you said that. I never forgot it, and it's true. When you really embrace the vocation, it feels like, this is what I was meant for, and so much of my life was being prepared for this moment.
Yeah, that was incredible. I mean, that was before even like COVID happened. I think there was like some kind of flu. Where family couldn't even come to the hospital. I think we were like 20. I don't know. We were like 22, 23, like having a baby, like no clue what's going on in life. Family couldn't be in the hospital, and like you're right. You were family. We were all family in that group, and it's like Yeah.
Jump right in with us.
Jump right in, and it was, yeah.
I think that a lot of times when people are lonely or they struggle or they suffer and they have defenses which develop as a result of that when they're young, which affect their social functioning later on, it allows them space to reach to God at a young age. And we were young. You find a lot of parents or older folks that find their faith later on in life, but to find it young probably means you suffer or you come from a great Catholic home life. But you guys you didn't spend a lot of time in the secular world, did you? Before we met?
What do you mean by that? Like, I went to public school my entire life, so does that count?
I think that counts.
Yeah.
I
I
think
went
that
to
counts.
a Catholic college, but it was
right.
way more secular than it was Catholic. But
what about you, Jim?
I never ventured outside anything like Catholic school.
Yeah.
I remember, I think the first time I went to a non-Catholic school was like to take one class so I could get a license.
Yeah.
What about socially? I mean, do you guys, even to this day, do you guys hang out with non-Catholics or no?
Sure. But our main social circles, our kids go to a Catholic school, I would say are mostly Catholic.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah.
The shared values. Do you find those Catholics to be judgmental?
I mean, not the ones we're friends with. I think there's sure that can be a I think Catholics in general, and I don't want to speak specifically about the communities that we're in because we're in great communities, but
sure,
scrupulosity is a real threat to freedom, and a desire for perfection can be so beautiful because when you are pursuing God, you naturally want to be like him, but that fear of making a mistake can really track the personality inside of the person, and it creates such a barrier. So you never really get like that true, funny, comfortable side of the person because there's kind of a big blanket on them.
I think so. Yeah. And I think oftentimes there's a projection of one's family system onto God. So in that, now listen, I want to qualify everything I'm saying and offer a disclaimer. This is a show. Yeah. So I'm pointing at tension-filled topics.
Yeah.
And I of course there are exceptions to all of this, and I don't want everyone out there to think that I'm targeting them in any way. But I think as a Catholic culture, there are things like scrupulosity. And I think as a Catholic culture, there is a fear of the world. Yes. And because of that fear of the world, there's a clamping down on the children within a family and a strong, in some ways, overcorrection and reaction to the lack of morality and secularism of the world. And so it's a beautiful intention. But what happens with the kids is that is translated as I have to earn love, or I get in trouble frequently. And we have those experiences in your home life in the school of love. And then you assume that God is that way. And so every little mistake I make, every venial sin, even if it's not sin, even if it's just a normal, neutral moral action, it's assumed that God's up there with like thunderbolts on a cloud, ready to strike you. And it's like the evil one. I asked before about, do you find Catholic subculture and Catholic friendships to have a spirit of criticism? That's the evil one waiting right there for us. The moment we pursue the spiritual life and pursue holiness, he's right there saying, you're so holy. You're so great. They're not so great. Mm-hmm. They make mistakes, right? He's just like attacks us with pride right afterwards. He's relentless.
Yeah.
And so for me, I've always loved to have a healthy balance of Catholic friends and non-Catholic friends, where the shared values are there with my Catholic friends, but the non-Catholic friends, I do feel less judged and criticized in general. I feel more freedom and space to make mistakes.
That's very interesting.
I would also say, like, the non-Catholic friends that I have, they call you out on your BS right away.
They do. That's true.
It's like they humiliate you in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And you have that rare Catholic friend that can do it, which is great. It's amazing. Those are really amazing people. But for the most part, you're right. If you hang out with your non-Catholic friends, they call you out. They call your church out. You're like, dang it, that is part of the church I am. I gotta work on some things. You're right.
Yes.
So there is that. I agree. Yeah, hanging out with kind of a mix can be healthy.
For sure.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I really want this show to be about, is like dialogue. I mean, you guys, you are early adopters. You're one of my first guests here, and you're Catholic, but I have guests that are not Catholic.
Right.
And I want to create a lot of space for people to talk and discuss whatever their beliefs are, whatever their political persuasion is, because we've shut that down. And there's nothing I can't stand more than cancel culture.
Right. That dialogue, I mean, that's where the Lord meets us in our differences, so that you can create something across lines. I mean, that's the whole point.
For sure.
That's dead.
Now, the other thing I notice about our friendship from the very beginning is that the two of you are very different.
Oh, really? No way.
You're very different people. And for those of us who are pursuing a vocation to marriage, there's a lot of searching about who the right fit is for us. And you do find couples where they're exactly alike, where it's two of kind of the same temperament and personality style. And then you have couples like the two of you. How would you describe some of your differences? And has that evolved? Has it been accentuated over the years? Have you become more like one another? Or are you just going in different trajectories?
Going back to like what she was talking about her schooling, like she was obviously raised Catholic, but she never went to Catholic school her whole life. I did.
Yeah.
And I was kind of a goof, took it for granted, and was just kind of oh yeah, sure, whatever, Catholic goof. But she was like pretty good about her faith and like would fight for it. So that challenged me a little bit. I was like, I should know everything, and I should know like way more than her and be acting more appropriate than she is. I guess it goes back to, yeah, she'd be that friend that wasn't necessarily.
Apparently, I called him out a lot.
Yeah, it wasn't that. But I don't think we've grown to be much of the same. I think we have some solid differences that are still there.
And they've grown in maturity and respect and love. Like we're like, I think, happier with those differences, and you accept those things you cannot change. Like that becomes like a real thing in a marriage. We're 15 years in. So that's a long time.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
And so okay, so maybe you're not becoming more similar, but I'm sure you stretch each other to grow in the gifts of the other. Sure. I mean, I'm Jim, I'm sure that Regina is helping you to become more laid back.
Yeah. So there is no doubt, like, I have no sense of time.
Yeah.
And when I say I'm coming home,
yeah,
it's within, an hour of that time.
Yeah.
And that's like every week where I drop that on her. And every Wednesday I get a reminder when I take the garbage out that no matter what I say, no matter what I do, the garbage is going to be not near the can or in the can. It's just going to be, I don't know, maybe 5 yards within the can. So those are the lovely little differences that we share. And I don't know, we're 15 years in, and it like once a week we're just running into these lovely, beautiful differences. And
they don't always feel lovely.
No, they definitely don't. No, it's I don't know. It's amazing with kids, having kids around, and just, when you're able to get by, not wanting to kill them or tell them to be quiet or this or that, but to realize that, like, whoa, there's someone here that helped me bring these 6 people into the world. And that's kind of an overwhelming thought. It's like, how's life possible through
this?
Six people came into this world through us. It's like, and they all, and each one of them has like a little personality that might match her, might match me, and you just see it, and you're like, this is crazy. It's
the
great.
blend within the children too. And it's not, no child is like perfectly like one of you or the other. So one of your kids lean in temperament toward one or the other, but then you see sprinkles of the opposite in there too. It's so interesting, isn't it?
And then when you see the one maybe who takes after me more in the male form with the female that takes after him, it's hysterical. It's like,
yes,
like, wow, okay, this is what we look like. And you see the, it's like a very strange mirror.
And it's filtered through gender too.
Yes.
So my son is my firstborn. My son is a lot like Teresa, my wife, and my daughter, who's younger, is a lot like me. But they're still filtered through their own particular gender, so it's not exactly alike.
Right.
It's so fascinating.
So our oldest son is in reaction, he's more like me, but he's a male, so it's even stronger and it's even like,
forceful.
Yes.
What are your personality like with you and Teresa? Is it?
I'm a bit more direct.
Yeah, she's so nice.
She's really, really nice, and she's socially she's more adept than me, which is a humbling thing to admit as a psychologist. She knows how to really empathize and connect with people better than I do to this day. I work on that. I've grown in that area, but her gifts for connecting with people are much stronger than mine. I think that I'm a bit more analytical and direct. I think part of that is the Italian quality of who I am, being from the Northeast. Going kind of circling all the way back to our friendship in the beginning, Regina, who is, I mean, the heart of your social interactions, right? Just like Teresa's the heart of our social interactions with the outside world. Like I get corrected by Teresa all the time in terms of how to connect with people. I mean, sometimes I need to be like, no, I know what I'm doing, but in general, she generally has the gifts. But Regina, back in the day, there was moments I remember being like, I don't want to impose on you guys, and you being like, no, Bryan, of course, come over. Like it's very Italian, right? It's like trump the awkwardness.
Yeah.
I remember a story when you remember my first roommate, Mike Ciaccio. And David.
Yeah.
He's great. He's going to be a guest on the show.
Awesome.
So Mike, and then I had David Hickson, and they were from the Midwest and from rural Virginia. And I spent time with them. And suddenly I realized that I was not the most likable person when I was around people from a different region of the country. Everybody loved me back in New England in the Northeast, but suddenly it's not that transplantable. And I remember I went home one time and I was sitting in a restaurant, and I'd worked in that restaurant prior, and I knew the waiter, and I was sitting with a couple young women at the time, and the waiter comes up to us, and both the waiter and the female that I was with at that moment realized that he brought her the wrong drink. And she said, "It's okay, I'll just drink it." And he said, "What do you mean you'll just drink it? I'll get you another one." And I remember pausing after being around my roommates and being like, they would think that's the rudest interaction of all time.
Yes.
But I knew that they were actually being really polite. Mm-hmm. It was like, I don't want you to feel awkward. I'm going to trump the awkwardness by yelling at you. And I think culturally, Regina, like that lined up for us historically. And I didn't want to impose on your family. I knew you were newlyweds, you had a baby, but there was that Italian part that's just like, no, stop, come in, have some food. Like, let me feed you.
When her brother got married, he married a great girl from Arizona, his first generation Mexican. And one of the speeches I gave to her when she came in, I said, "Don't worry, they're not yelling at you. They're just talking." Referring to her Italian family.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's so true.
Yeah. I also, something that also stands out in my mind as something characteristic of the two of you is I guess I have questions about this, but I would say your love of sports and Pittsburgh fandom. And I don't know if, Regina, you're actually a fan, or because you love Jim so much, you became your fandom deepened?
Sure.
Or a combination of both? You were kind of a fan, but you just loved Jim. Like, there's things that, like, Teresa never, like, she kind of played video games growing up, and then she fell in love with me, and so she was like, okay, I'll try some video games, or I'll like the Celtics, So is it relational for you? Like, what is the feminine perspective on Pittsburgh sports, which is a real thing? Pittsburgh sports is a real thing.
Yes. See, Pittsburgh sports, and in my family growing up, like, we watched the Steelers. That is what we did. We were huge football fans. And when we first started hanging out together, we went to the games. That was like one of our first dates. But even before we were dating, we just hung out at Steeler games. So I was a true football fan. I think I became a hockey fan relationally. And
nice.
Now, due to just the timing of football games and the duration, I would say I watch a lot less football, unfortunately, but I'm still a fan. I mean, it's hard, but Penguin games, they're like a great amount of time. Our whole family is into it. I mean, we love sports.
Nice. Yeah. I would say I was into the Penguins. Our family was a big hockey family, but like, it's kind of like a subculture when I grew up in Pittsburgh. Like, Steelers was it.
Yeah.
I think hockey in general is a subculture, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's caught up now. I think it's kind of equal.
Sidney Crosby changed the culture in Pittsburgh. I mean, we had some real. I guess Lemieux did the same thing.
Lemieux definitely.
How dare you talk about Jaromir Jagr that way? How dare you?
We have a picture of him in our.
We got one back there. No, but there's I like the Steelers and everything. I love them, but like, when I started hanging out with Regina, it was like I finally entered into the true culture of Pittsburgh in that regard. We go to tailgates. Like, the tailgating scene in Pittsburgh is unbelievable. They've unfortunately built buildings and limited it, but like, that's what you did. You'd wake up at 6 a.m., go down to the stadium and tailgate. And so that's what we started doing before we even started dating. It's like a big part of how we started dating, really, was just through the Steeler tailgates and games. And I think we even went to Cleveland.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Twice, that was long before we did it.
Yeah. Went to the Ravens game. It was
That's so cool.
So then I think we kind of shared then. I was like, she became a hockey fan. I became more of we were both obviously Pittsburgh fans, but.
Jim, do you still have time to watch anything? I know my sport fandom went from I love all sports to I love certain sports to I love basketball to I watch Celtic games to I watch a Celtic game if I have time.
Yeah. The highlight.
The key thing is that I've older sons now, so I can use that as an excuse. Oh yeah,
yeah.
Brilliant.
This is the first time I've played fantasy football in probably 13, 14 years.
Because we have a 13-year-old.
Because a 13-year-old. So I'm like picking guys. I'm like, oh man, this guy's great. And like,
honey, it's for the kids.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. So I'll get a game in. It's great too, especially when you get a ticket. Oh, we got to take him to a game.
Yep.
Yeah.
When our son picked his team, he was like, "Mom, do you know what fantasy football is?" I said, "James, like, I used to beat your dad every week in fantasy football. Like, this is what we did."
Oh, really up the mom cool factor. You got to take your victories where you can, as a mom.
Exactly.
Nice. Very nice.
We're a little more full circle on those things.
What do you think about the idea of sports as religion? Sports as religion. By that I mean, there's fandom and then there's fanaticism, and for certain people it becomes their new creed. Their loyalty to a certain team, the amount of time, like, it's almost worship. Have you ever like reflected on like I'm sure for you guys it fits, there's a certain hierarchy in terms of where it fits with your faith, but
right.
I mean, religion is in the absence of religion or the decline of religion in American culture, people turn to sports oftentimes.
Right.
Is that about why or what that's about?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's changed a little bit even in the last couple of years, but Pittsburgh definitely, like, that was like, if the Steelers lost Monday, Tuesday, we're miserable in this town.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel that way?
I do sometimes.
I do too.
I get real salty. Yeah, I do.
Not for that long, but I do feel it.
Yeah. I do feel it. But I think that the more and more social media stuff, it's like almost distracted us from that God.
Yeah.
It's really weird. It's like people aren't as engaged anymore. There's not droves of people going to the game anymore. It's like, here's my God.
You don't have to.
Yeah, I'm going to go. I'm going to gamble. I'm going to do all this. And it's like the community part of it's kind of gone a little bit.
But it's so special when the community is there when you go to a live game, though, isn't it? It's really special.
Right. It's like I'm lamenting the fact that we're worshiping sports. And it's gone, but that is kind of gone a little bit. But when it was here, you're right. It was. It was.
I wish we could worship sports as an idol again.
Let's get rid of social media so we can worship sports again.
Yeah.
But you're right. It did it definitely happens. It's definitely it happens still in little pockets. I think people do it for maybe their kids' sports teams.
That's what I was going to say.
I think some of the parents that we peers that we have that like their kid plays, I don't know, 12-year-old amateur hockey or whatever.
Locally. How are those parents? Have you guys encountered those parents yet? You know, the ones I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
The ones whose lives depend on their child's performance.
Yeah. Yes. That's where I see it most.
That's where we see it most.
Like, that's the God now. That's the worship is.
It's so upsetting, isn't it?
It's
so strange.
And we really say yes to a lot of sports. Like, our kids play whatever they want for the most part. But they also kind of know, like, hey, you're going to miss it if it's during mass time or if it's during, we have a birthday party, like we're just not going to go. And that's, maybe you won't make the best team, but that's, there's more important things.
But let's face it. It's probably good that you realize that you're not making it to the NHL now.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no doubt about that.
That'd be good.
There's a lot of people that think that that's what's happening. I would say that's the shift. If you're going to actually go with what's replaced Sunday morning, it's people's sports.
So a quote comes to mind from his cousin who's a priest, and he always is saying, what the church drops, the world picks up. And it seems like and it's a little bit of a crushing comment because you kind of know,
but it's true.
It's so true. Like that Sunday mass, bringing in the Lord's Day, like all of that, like that has really been depleted in our culture. And I think that we look to replace it. And if it's your kid playing a sport or if it's watching the professionals play sports, like you're just looking for that thing to do on that day.
Yeah.
If that's what happens.
Yeah. I think too, there's something about the lack of effort required on the part of the individual. Like it's almost like vicarious striving.
Yeah.
Where I can, it's kind of frustrating and exhilarating at the same time. It's like the fan doesn't have actual control over the outcome. No. But you hear people talk about their team with the pronoun we. We lost. But you're not on the team. But the emotional investment, as if it's me and it's my team, the ownership, and like I'm rooting in a certain way. I'm rooting for myself and I'm rooting for us. And I think there still is a collective quality to fandom. Even although I was going to say, even on the internet, even in social media, there's you can still narrow your focus down to your team. But well, the side thought I had was like, actually now it's becoming more national. At least in the basketball world, it's hard to even root for a team. You root for players because I think there's no helmets in basketball. It's really personality driven. So and the players move from team to team so frequently that there's not that same team allegiance as there used to be. There's not that team loyalty. But still, I think that the vicarious striving is there. I'm living out my fantasies, especially if people feel unsatisfied in their professional life.
Sure.
Because it's interesting because sports and in a larger way, play in general is work without stress. Now it's stress for professional athletes.
Yeah.
But the reason our children play is because they're practicing for work. The reason as adults we have hobbies is because we're working without the stress. We are built for work. This is like goes right back to Genesis, right?
Right.
You know, that like you're gonna work out your salvation with this on the sweat of your brow. We in the space that if we have free time and space, we're gonna put a hobby in there, and generally it's work. It's a work related hobby, but it doesn't stress us out. Even if that hobby is watching film or watching television shows, you have an opinion on it. Your hobby is to be a film critic, right? And there's no consequences. You're not being paid for it. Right. People aren't reading your articles, but we're still so built for work, and that's what play is. So I think sports is a particular manifestation of that desire to work that's always there for all of us.
Yeah, and it's a great opportunity to find excellence, to face stress. I mean, I think about my kids, and there's so many people watching them when they're playing. They have to perform on the spot. I mean, it's amazing what they're all
don't you judge my child. My child is love independent of whether or not he scores. You got that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's like people, they teeter on that though. It's like the kid should be doing that. You're right, without stress, should be fun. Like how long do you get to be in a team atmosphere like that?
Yeah.
And yet some of them burn out by the time they're age 14. They're like, I don't want to touch my skates again. I don't want to touch a basketball again.
Because it was stressful. Right.
Because it was stressful.
Yeah.
Such a good point.
Right.
Just over practice. It's like, no, go outside and play a pickup game.
And strike a balance. Sorry if I.
Yeah. No, please go ahead.
Just that balance between stress and excellence, because the reason why we're doing this is to teach them something. Like we're not, standing on a soccer field Saturday for 8 hours unless it was valuable for the rest of their life. And just the play experience isn't just that, it's like, no, we're teaching you something to take to the rest of your life.
Before we were talking here, we just casual conversation about exorcisms before we started recording.
Yeah.
So I worked with an exorcist one time who talked about this. He shared with me that the devil loves competition. And this struck me as an interesting statement. And I said, what do you mean the devil loves competition? Should we not be competitive? He said, no. It's okay to compete. But there's a very subtle, nuanced distinction here. So whenever it's me against you, in my mind, subjectively, if I perceive it that way, and I'm putting myself above or below you, it becomes a question of dignity. I am above you or below you, and I'm subjugating you. There's a strong temptation to pride associated with performance. Mm-hmm. So Satan loves that. Mm-hmm. And that's what you don't want to get wrapped up in. Separate from that, there is space for, I want to excel. I want to do the best job that I can with my gifts to reflect God's omnipotence and God's ultimate proficiency. And I want the opponent to do the same thing. I actually will their good and want them to do the best. And at the end, there happens to be a score. There happens to be a consequence or a result of each of us doing our best. And that's the way to compete and be competitive. It's not I'm better than you, and therefore my identity is better than yours.
Right.
I always thought that was very interesting.
Yes, that's very interesting. And you see that on the field with the handshake. Like that's the end of the game. You shake the other team's hands. Mean that.
Right. Or you have the Michael Jordans of the world who will step on your throat in order to win. I will do anything. And that's all sympathy and compassion to the Michael Jordans of the world who happen to be the best at what they do, but they're unhappy because their self-worth is based on whether or not that's that hierarchy, whether or not I'm better than someone and I'll do whatever it takes. Morality be damned in order to win. And it actually creates an emptiness within them.
And it ruins the game.
I know.
Right?
I know.
Yeah.
I love respecting my opponent.
Right. My son, a couple years ago, was on a club hockey team, and I went to a tournament, and I had a baby, so taking the baby to the ice rink isn't a common thing that I did. I was so mortified by the behavior of his team, and truly embarrassed. His team was pretty, it was awful. It was embarrassing the way that they were competing with the other kids. And there was a full-blown fight. And these kids are in 6th grade. So it was like they were very little to be fighting. And I was then turned to pride because my son went over to the kid on the other team and like helped him up. And I was like, okay, we're still okay. Like,
we're good parents. We're doing something right.
Right.
You ever see that?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so encouraging.
Golf now, and I know that's like kind of be a hoity-toity sport, but
hoity-toity. That's a good word.
I think in golf it lends itself to like that competitive thing that you're talking about. Like, I'm going to try my best, but I also want the guy against me to play well too, because it just could be super embarrassing to play with someone that's just not playing well.
Yeah.
And you push each other more and more, like as the holes go on, the pressure builds and there's respect there. And that doesn't always happen, but I think at least I've seen it in golf where there's you're cheer for the guy. Nice shot.
Mm-hmm.
Nice finish.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I think there's a recognition of how hard that game is, that you're just happy when anyone else is happy about themselves, because the dangerous thing in golf is you just ripping yourself. That's how people rage and throw clubs, and you're so hard on yourself, and it doesn't matter if anyone's watching. You can be hard on yourself if you go on a course by yourself.
Oh yeah. No, there's no doubt. I mean, and you're out there and you have to put the ball in the hole at some point. Like, it's not like in a competition.
10
like
shots
when
later.
you're on the weekend, you're hanging out.
I was gonna say one triple bogey later, it does go in the hole.
It's real. You got to mark that score down. It's not like you're on the weekend with your buddies. It's like, I'll just pick up this hole. Forget that.
Yeah.
No, you got to finish the hole and you got to mark the score. And it's like, man, okay, come on, man. I want to see you do well this hole. I feel so bad for you. This is so hard.
And that's virtue too, isn't it? It's the integrity associated with the right thing transcends how I feel emotionally at this moment. I have to finish the hole no matter how angry I am or frustrated or despairing I am, how depressed I am about my play.
Right.
Circling back to how play is work without stress, I did want to talk about work with you guys. So, Jim, I want to start with you. So last time we talked, you were counseling in high school, and then we spoke recently, and suddenly you're the principal. Like, please bridge that for me. What has happened?
I have no idea. They made a terrible mistake. I don't think there was anyone else to take the position. No, I was there. I was at the school for like 9 years. I was like an assistant hockey coach. So I was, I don't know. I was involved in the school in many different ways. And I guess just after being there for 9 years, the previous guy that held my assistant principal job, he was ready to move on. He was ready to, do other things. I think the job definitely, there's a time limit on it. And it was an invitation. He just said, I think you should try it. And I was like,
wow.
He was my supervisor at the time. I respected him. I said, okay. I've never thought in a million years, especially when I was in high school, that I'd be back at a school. And then I was like, okay, I'm a counselor. It's kind of like being in the school. And then it was like, okay, now I'm going to be an assistant principal and, telling kids that they should be on time, that they should have good grades, not do bad things. And
do good things and not bad things, kids.
Exactly. So it was really just an invitation, I think, that did it. There's no way I would have thought to do that in any other way. So I don't know. That's kind of what was in my path to get there. It's definitely challenging. There's no doubt. It stretched me
it's a lot of work
as a person in every single way. So I've been doing it.
Say more about that though. When you say every single way, what way specifically has it stretched you?
Definitely stretched me, just in the simple fact of like the school doesn't start its day without me, like getting on the PA system, doing the prayer, pledge, and announcements, and it's like every day you got to be at the same time, and then it extends you after hours too, like. Let's go to the prom. Let's go to the football game. Let's go to all these different events.
Yeah. So you can't within 1 hour's time give the announcements like you would tell Regina I'll be home, and she has to expect it's an hour either way. That doesn't work at school. You actually have to be there.
Yeah.
And give the announcement at a specific time.
Exactly. Like before, like the 9 years I was the counselor, it was like, I could call the other counselor, hey, I might be a few minutes late. The kid threw up. Now it's, now it's like, sorry, Regina, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
So it's just a tribute to her than it is to anything, and just stretching the family and stretching what we can do in being there. But and then it's just like the kids look to you, and it's like, do I have to be perfect? No, that's probably not the best thing, but you feel like you have to be perfect.
Yeah. It's a different level of them looking up to you, isn't it? Like like as you move up in the hierarchy, their dad issues play out with you in a more pronounced way. Like the modeling is so much more important the higher you move up.
Right. And as a counselor, I had the counseling background. It wasn't that hard of a challenge for me to connect with a kid.
Yes. That's so important.
But then when they walk in, it's assistant principal. They don't see, the years of counseling or anything like that. They just see.
But it doesn't matter. It's still a tool in your toolbox. I know in my position working at Catholic Psych, I provide some direct care still, but I'm working there as largely an administrative position. I'm chief of staff there, but my ability to connect with people definitely informs my leadership role.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, there's no doubt about that.
But the kids aren't expecting to connect with the principal. They do expect when they walk into a counselor's office that they're in search of something that a counselor would give them. So it's a real gift to the students.
Which is why it's more potent, I think, more powerful.
Absolutely.
They definitely see the transformation. I will say the two principals that I work with, like I definitely need to learn how to like lay down the law a little bit, and they've helped a ton with that. Just because I'm always like, all right, stop being empathic. This is not a counseling session. This is like
the kid actually has to show up to class.
Yeah, he needs boundaries. That's the best thing for him. No is the best thing for him, and so I'm lucky. It's awesome working in this school because there's definitely a community of people that help you. It's not. Cool. It's a healthy place. It's come a long way.
It's been a beautiful transformation in him. Absolutely. It's been beautiful. It's been certainly hard. And what I say often is that if I didn't think that this was his true vocation in the school, we would not be doing it, because it's very taxing on the family. But it is very clear that he is daily doing the Lord's work in a way that is very fulfilling.
It can't just be his mission, because if it's a choice for him, he has to choose the family over the professional development. But if it becomes a unity in the family around it being a mission, and your wife supports you and knows that not only is Jim sacrificing, but at times Regina has to sacrifice for what God is calling the family to participate in. It reminds me of like soldiers, right? It's like to say to the wife of a soldier, thank you for your service, because you're sacrificing too. That's not recognized enough. And I know even just starting the show, it's created so much strain on my family in terms of the effort and time that I'm putting in. And I could not. Did you ever see the movie Cinderella Man? I almost kind of wish you guys picked that for a movie. Loved it. And he was gonna box. He was gonna fight, and he says to Renee Zellweger, like, I can't do this if you're not in my corner.
Yes.
I cannot do it if you're not in my corner. And it means everything to him that she is. So it's really beautiful to see, Regina, you coming alongside Jim and supporting that, even though it means you suffer a little more at times.
Sure. But in a way, and this is truly of the Lord, like in a way that is very good for me, in a very particular way that has purified my heart. It's purified my vocation. Friday nights are a bit harder on the kids. Like he's very rarely home. He's watching other kids play sports, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But no, it's been very good. Hard, cool. But great.
Yeah, and I think that's just something that a lot of us are going to run into in the Catholic world, because there's a position that probably historically was done by a religious person that they give a family so that they can do that role. And as lay people move into these different roles, it's like oh man, it's
sure.
You better be ready and you better be committed because it's going to stretch the heck out of you. Because it was done by someone that like they dedicated
had the time.
Yeah.
They had the time. Yeah.
They had the time. Yeah.
Regina, I want to switch to you a little bit. When we last talked, you said that you're on like 100 boards. You're on boards, all these boards. I know. I think this is a bigger question that I have for you because I know that you have a dimension to your personality that wants to produce. You are a stay-at-home mom, but there's this part of you that has, you have gifts that can be exercised in a professional context. You've prioritized your family life over those gifts, but there's still a part of you that wants to exercise them. And I think probably my guess is as your kids get older, more and more we'll see you entering into the professional realm. But in the meantime, you're spending a lot of time, what would we call it? Consulting with different professional communities? What are you doing?
It's really volunteering for nonprofits that I'm passionate about in a board position, which helps the organization stay on track in their mission. So in a huge way, that is a very motherly role. Keeping people at the heart of a mission, that's a very feminine thing. So when the moment that like money or finances come into play, it's like nobody wants to hear what I have to say. Like that's not my role. But if it's like the heart of what the organization is doing, like that is something I could do. Or how do we gather the community around this mission? Like I'm really good at throwing a party. Like I can do that. And that's a very great way of serving an organization. So what's kind of funny about that whole thing is I had such a burning desire for that like production in my heart for a few years. And I felt like I was kind of grasping at it in many different areas where it just like wouldn't work out. And I had this year of it just really worked out. And then when I became pregnant with my sixth baby, I just felt the Lord.
I almost spit out my wine just now.
Yeah, sixth baby.
Baby number 17, I realized.
Well, it was little Miriam. I just had such a different desire to be home with her. In a way, it was just such a gift. Like the Lord gave me this chance and like this 1 year where I did produce and I saw like a ton of fruit to that quote unquote worldly production. And then I was like, wait, no, like this baby is just so much better than that. And it's still good and I can still do it on the side, but it was a shift in my heart.
I think as your kids get older too, you're like, oh, that window
is
so small.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I just want you to stay. Yeah. I want every child I have to stay within the ages of like 8 months to a year and a half. That's my sweet spot. Where I don't know if it's because what I do all day and I have to think all day. I want to come home and get some kind of emotional response where I'm like, and, and they're like, I love you, Dad, without me having to think. It's like purely emotive and I can like put in no effort. And then the attachment and bonding is so strong. Then they hit, they start to get 2 and 3 and they learn words like no and why, and they have their own perspective. But in the beginning, it's like pure just connectivity. And they're not like Jell-O still. The first 8 months, they're just Jell-O.
No, they have their whole personality and it's...
They do. I know. They do have their own personality, but they're still kind of Jell-O until about 8 months. And then it starts to form a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then it starts to crystallize. And they're not fighting you yet. So 8 months to a year and a half is my favorite time. And I wish all my kids stay there forever.
Yeah. No, that's a magic spot. And yeah. You look back at videos of your big kids at that age too, and it's like, you were fully there. You were fully there at that 8-month period.
Yes, it flourishes, mm-hmm. It expands, it continues, but yeah, the uniqueness and the personality is still there. All right, I want to talk about integration and our discussion here. Integration. I want to talk about integration because with a lot of my guests, I have to explain what I mean by that. and it's psychology with religion. But we met attending a very unique program where that's just a buzzword, that you breathe integration there. That's the whole point of the program, to look at how faith, spirituality, theology, and philosophy integrate with psychology. So tell me about where you got, do you even consider the relationship between those two now? Are they, do you think about that? Do you think about a relationship between how you engage with the world and the psychology, with how that parallels or loads into or colors your spiritual life? Do you think about that stuff anymore, all your training, or are they still kind of in separate boxes for you? Because it's a difficult project to integrate the two.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to plug Catholic Psych and say that I continually work on integration through the practice of mindfulness and working with Catholic Psych. So it's something, I don't think that it's ever ends. Like, you have to continually work on integration depending on like who you are in the present moment. I mean, that changes in a lot of ways. So I think it's a continual practice. Yeah.
Jim, do you think about this at all, or are you just like the penguins and my students, and that's it?
I think that's the only way I think.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think it's like fully integrated in there, and hopefully it's not overly. Sometimes I have to stop myself and do the stop analyzing, dude. Calm down. But I mean, it's the relationship. Yeah, I mean, I'll tell the kids outright. Look, the relationship with your father up above that's your truest identity, and it's like everything comes from there. And they first kind of look at you like, what is this guy talking about? And I don't think they take it as this guy's like some crazy religious zealot. It's like, there's something there. Definitely something there about my identity, and it hits home. But yeah, no, I don't know. I think I'd probably do that a lot, or at least I try to. And there's a lot of great people out there that do it too. I mean, there's a lot of good different podcast books that are really getting at that. There's a lot of hunger out there for that.
Lets you consider all of it. It's like you get to see an entire person with integration, not just one aspect of them.
It's true. And I think you're right, Jim. I think there's a lot of hunger out there for it. But I think when you surround yourself with it, with the question of integration, you don't realize, you become immersed in it, and you don't realize how little that's actually disseminated to the larger world. Mm-hmm. And things that we might take for granted, like what things were like in my school of love and my relationship with my parents, that affects how I perceive God. Like, that's novel for so many people. Yeah. Like when we were talking about scrupulosity earlier, what you learn as a child in terms of your development, how that affects how you look at God and whether or not he is judging every little thing you do. The beauty of the spiritual life is God shatters those unconscious expectations and assumptions over the course of your life. Mm-hmm. Because your parents love you, and no matter what, no matter how good of a parent you are, you're going to fail too. Mm-hmm. So you're going to fail your kids. We are born into damaged relationships. So we're going to fail, and we're going to assume even the negative experiences we have with our parents also apply to God. But that's not who he is. I know in my work, I tell clients, if you're describing to me something about God or how you perceive God that is in conflict with the teachings of the Catholic Church, we're not talking about God. We're talking about your parents. Because that's not who God reveals himself to be. Mm-hmm. That's not, and of course we can look at all the studies and all the research around how even something like, this will probably come across as controversial to many of our listeners, but even something like atheism is reflective of, you can explore how atheistic kinds of thoughts can be traced back to dynamics with one's father, even more so than one's mother, but early childhood experiences. Now, someone could look at that and be like, well, religion then is only wish fulfillment of something psychological. It doesn't mean that it proves faith, right? You can say that it's It's all psychological, and that it's a projection of unmet childhood needs that we even create religion. But that's not how I look at it. That's not how we look at it. We look at it as preparatory and part of the spiritual journey.
Yeah. Well, I think I've learned a lot from listening to different, even atheists. I think I agree with them on a lot of things. And it's like just when they get to the end, they just want to shift it a little bit. And you're like, it doesn't, you're very rational up to that point, and then you just switched it. It's like there's something else deeper going on with you, man. I think some of the atheists are incredible to listen to a point.
Yes.
And
yes.
There's that like little shift at the end that you're like, there's no rational reason for you to think like that all of a sudden. There's something deeply that's missing.
And even beyond what is rational, faith is a gift. We believe that as Catholics.
Right.
We can't blame anyone for not believing. And there's a mystery associated with when and how and why God offers that gift to people at certain times in their life. And also the darker moments that they need to go to and go through and struggle with faith. I'm a devout Catholic, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I've never had any doubts about my faith ever. Right. I think it's an ongoing question that we have to examine. I think, what was it, Teresa Lisieux on her deathbed had to wrestle with the question of, am I faced with oblivion right now?
Yeah.
Or is everything that I've built my life on
right.
based on a truth? So it's a human experience to enter into the question of faith and trust. I also want to ask you this, to get a little more psychological with you personally.
Uh-oh.
We'll start with Regina now.
Good, yeah. Start with her.
What are you working on in yourself?
Oh, wow.
Do you ever work on yourself, or are you just whatever?
Okay, so I'm going to bring up my favorite hobby, which is running. And that's where a lot of my self-work is done, if I'm being really honest. I combine a lot of prayers into a physical exercise, and I'm pretty disciplined about my practice. And the ability for me to rely.
I hate people like you, by the way.
I know, it's terrible. It's terrible. But that is
but I only hate you because it makes me feel insecure and I'm jealous and I'm not a runner and it makes me feel terrible about myself. But that's for me to work through. Go on.
Well,
yeah, please.
Well, that's my time, and I'll keep going.
It's so admirable. I'm obviously teasing you, but it is really admirable to do that.
But every day I kind of am like, okay, how am I going to do this? And it's a little puzzle that I have to figure out because I love it. And that's what motivates me to do it, is because I truly love the feeling of running as fast as I can. So it's worth it to me to do the struggle.
Regina, this is a long preamble of avoiding the question. What are you? I don't want to know how you work on yourself or the context within which you work on yourself. What is the thing that you're working on?
So when you're running, what are you working on?
Jim wants to know what you're working on.
All right. This is a deep question. Self-belief is a huge one.
Common.
Trust.
Very common.
Yeah. Trust in the Lord. Acceptance of exactly where I am now, not where I want to be later.
Very mindfully Catholic there, right?
Okay.
No, I mean, that's Catholic mindfulness in a nutshell. Yeah. It's being where you are and accepting where you are.
I think that's the thing. I think also finding joy, not just accepting it, but then searching for the joy in the moment too. Because you can accept where you are and still hate it, and but loving that.
I just observed what we would call inappropriate affect. You're like finding joy. Like your face didn't look very joyful. As if it's like some terrible, awful challenge that you need to overcome. And then there's that joy thing.
I get pooped on all day. You sometimes not that joyful. You got to find it.
Yeah. All right, Jim. What about you? What are you working on?
Working on? I think just being accountable and relational. I think like I could go off the grid.
Yeah.
And just totally be like happy.
Yes.
I wouldn't say happy. It would be like I probably wouldn't be happy, but like I tend towards just like
distancing.
Yeah, distancing or just going off the grid. Like
yes.
if I could go work on a farm and
Yeah.
not see people for a while and just grind out something like that, I would probably tend towards that. But obviously, that's not what I'm called to at all, and I know that's not what I'm supposed to. But like just entering into relationship with the Lord and reminding myself that like, wait, He's there. He loves me. Like,
Yeah.
there's goodness stuff there, and just entering into relationships with the people around me and realizing that people are there to support you in all those different areas. But definitely just like I don't know, maybe holding myself account isn't the right way to say it, but I guess that's the way I think about it is
Yeah.
holding yourself to account to the things and to the people in your life.
Yeah, no, there is a moral dimension to it. And what you're describing is a very common experience among men. I often say this, and this is a vulnerable thing for me to say on the air. I will never leave my wife and family, but I know where the door is.
Right.
For men, the challenge is to stay engaged, to be relational, to empathize, to stay connected.
Right.
The temptation is to distance. And that's why in the world, culturally, we have so many deadbeat dads who leave.
Right.
Women don't have that same problem. You don't have a lot of deadbeat moms. In fact, it's the flip side of the coin for women. We have so many helicopter controlling, overly involved moms. And the task for women is to take their foot off the gas and pull back. And your children will let you know that you need to. Like, Mom, my friends are here. Stop rubbing my hair. Stop kissing me. Don't make me say I love you. Like, back off, right? When, like the helicopter moms in the world. Of course, there is exceptions here, of course. But I'm saying by and large, as a constitutive dimension to being masculine or feminine, it's complementary in a way, right? So Jim, when you say like in some ways there's this temptation for me to go out on a farm and do my own thing, and like it's easier. And that's a very, I get it. Yeah. And it's in some ways it's a very, don't take this the wrong way. I'm not saying you're immature, but there's an immature dimension to who we are as men. Yeah. There's a boyhoodness about that desire to like go off on my own and do my own thing and not engage in family.
Right.
But it doesn't even have to be family. If you're not married, it's in relationships, it's in connection. If you're a priest, engage in your parish rather than, reading theology books or playing video games. I mean, it's very easy to hide as a priest as well, right? It's very easy to disengage from a masculine perspective. And like I said, like, women aren't off the hook either. I think on the feminine side of things, it's the Blessed Virgin, right? Who embodies letting go.
Yeah,
she let her
die, right?
Yeah, right. Talk about. Can you imagine the temptation for her to step up and control things?
Yes.
Like that's why no other creature has experienced more pain and agony than Our Lady. Mm-hmm. In her purity, she models letting go. Yes. But that's a universal experience too for all of us, which is that we see those that we love suffer. And then we're faced with the question, what do I do with that? Mm-hmm. Especially in our personal lives. I'll tell you, for me, knowing what I know and learning what I've learned and seeing those I love so deeply make mistakes and know that they're not asking me for help. And if I offer help, they're not going to listen. That's very different than a client coming to me and saying, hey, help me. Okay. We're on the same page. Now I can help you. But in my personal life, it's like watching car crashes in slow motion. Yes. I see you doing it and I love you so much and it's so painful. And I see you doing this thing that I know is going to end in disaster. And then it ends in disaster and there's nothing I can do about it. My only recourse is to the Blessed Mother in those times because she knows exactly what that's like.
Yeah. It's almost in a mother's natural disorder to enable. I mean, that's a real hard thing to stop once you start.
Yeah. Letting your children make their own mistakes.
Yes.
Not telling them what to do, not being too involved.
Right.
No, it's
or not letting the car crash. Sometimes the car crash is the
needs to happen
consequence of things that need to occur. And that's a very difficult thing to stand back and say, okay, I'm gonna let the natural consequence occur.
And trust God and pray and trust God with the consequences.
Right.
I want to ask you guys one more question, and it's not actually my question to ask. I have a series of questions that are thought-provoking, and you guys have to pick a number, 1 through 60, and whatever you pick is your question. So you guys have to pick a question.
You're working on first? Or
What's that?
Do we get to ask you what you're working on first?
Sure. In what sense? What context?
Like the question that you just asked us.
Oh! You mean like what am I working on within myself?
Yeah.
Woo! I would say trust. Okay. I think trusting God to guide and provide and protect me amidst what is a very frightening experience in even starting this show. Like I've learned the amount of things that I've learned in the past 4 months. I didn't think I'd be capable of learning in order to create the show and start the show. And I'm a one-man band right now. I don't have any employees to help me do this. So it's ranging from having this conversation to video editing to hardware to social media. Like, what can I do to get this out there? I mean, it's crazy how much I'm learning, and I'm probably doing all of it pretty well, but none of it exceptionally well. But there's been so many challenges and hiccups along the way where I've been tempted to quit. So many times I've been tempted to quit because it's been so frustrating and difficult. And then to trust in the spiritual realm that God wants me to do this. And I just sort of don't give up. And it's a choice of the will to hang in there. And then once I make that choice, even though every time I don't want to make that choice, every time, it'll probably happen tomorrow. Even though I know the outcome, it'll probably happen tomorrow. But to stay in that pocket, use a sports reference, with the defense coming around you, and trust that you're safe in the pocket and trust your offensive line, that everything's going to work out, and then just execute and throw that football has been exciting, exhilarating, and terrifying for me, because every single time I felt like I've hit an obstacle, it's worked out in a way that I can't anticipate, in a way that I don't expect, every single time. Now, have I completely learned it? Am I going to struggle tomorrow or the next day when I'm trying to edit this video? Probably. I haven't learned it completely yet, but it's where I am and what I feel like I'm called to right now.
All right.
That's super exciting.
Throw it for the touchdown, Bryan. We can't wait.
I'm glad you endure all the hard parts, because it's exciting to watch.
Yes.
Not your hard parts, but the good product that you're putting out.
Yeah.
I just want to create a place where people can just come in and sit down and relax and talk.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that goes into that, but people never would ever have an insight into. But whatever, if that's what I'm called to do to make it happen, that's what I'm called to do.
Absolutely.
We'll talk to you.
So that's where.
Yeah, this is enjoyable as heck.
But all right, so we have
that's awesome.
Number, huh?
1 through 60. So you guys can either choose to pick the same number, or you can each pick your own number. I think that's more exciting to pick your own number, because then there's a winner and a loser.
Perfect.
I'm just kidding. There's no winner or loser.
17.
Okay, I picked 17.
Do I have to pick a number?
Yeah. Well, we'll do Regina first.
Okay.
And then you can pick your number.
All right.
All right, ready? Here's your question, Regina. What is something that you do differently than anyone else you know?
Ooh.
And why?
I can't answer this right?
I would love to know your answer to this.
You can offer your answer afterwards, but I want to hear Regina's thoughts on herself first.
Okay. Well, I'm thinking of 2 things, but I think shopping is what I do differently. So I can't even say these things out loud, but
I have the paperwork to prove that one.
So my sister and I,
The doorbell rings with a new Amazon box. Go on.
No, well, so yeah, sure, I do that, but shopping is like this experience of. This is gonna sound so ridiculous. I can't believe I'm saying this out loud. My sister and I go to TJ Maxx and Marshalls, and I'm telling you, that's like where we learned how to be women. It was like growing up with our mom at TJ Maxx and Marshalls. And so we go in there, and it's like this quest to find like the thing that no one can find. And
it's adventurous.
It's such an adventure. We kind of do it once a week. We take our kids, like our little kids, with us, and they think that it's like the best place in the world. And they'll like comment.
Even the boys?
Even the boys. Like going to Marshall's is like our family event once a week. It's so no, not with him. He does not come into Marshall's. And yeah, you just, because there's nothing like laid out for you necessarily to tell you what to think about it, there's this like real opportunity to find your taste and love something like slightly quirky or
yes.
And
you have to deal with disappointment because you're like, oh, this is such a nice article of clothing, but it's not my size.
Yeah, you do have to do that. But the home stuff is really like, it's when you go around our house, like we have some like really nice things, but then there's always at least several items in the room that are specifically found at Marshall's. And
that's awesome.
So
is there one in your background right now that I can see? Or are these all?
Probably 10. All the frames for sure.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, definitely the frames.
That's so cool.
I will say, I know I knocked it, but it is pretty cool to see them go into a store.
See?
Oh, I'm sure you love the Marshall purchases as opposed to some other purchases.
I'll take that any day. But I'll walk in the store with them, and I turn my head, and they're gone. It's like the store is like a box. Where could they have gone?
Yeah.
And it's like watching locusts run through grass. It just is nuts.
Yeah.
I think of Willy Wonka. It's like when the kids enter the chocolate factory and they just take off.
Yeah. No, it's like that. But sometimes we'll bring people with us, and my sister and I are like, they don't know how to do this. We're like, shocked.
Let me teach you how to shop at Marshall's.
Like it's a whole thing. So,
Jim, what did you think? What did you think is something that she does unique? That is unique relative to other people.
I was going to say train for marathons using only a treadmill.
I do that.
Oh,
which is awful.
That's dedication.
If you hate running, you'll love running on a treadmill.
Oh, I hate
26 miles on a treadmill.
That's insane.
Yeah.
You have. We should talk further about this off camera.
Yeah. You never run 26 on a treadmill, but you do run. Yeah.
Yeah, you prep for it.
It makes the treadmill, or it makes the marathon like a treat, because it's like I'm not on a treadmill. Like this is so easy in comparison.
There's your joy.
I guess if you make yourself suffer in one context, what other people would consider also suffering becomes less sufferable.
So much fun.
Nice. All right, Jim, pick a number.
All right, 59.
59. Wow.
Gensel. There you go. Like that. Oh wait, I have Bryan Ross and you got Gensel. That's cool.
There you go.
Yeah.
So there's two questions here, but it's well, I guess one's a follow-up. You can kind of take this whatever direction you want, but what is justice and what is truly evil?
Oh my gosh.
Oh.
I know. One.
You blew it with your selection. That's a tough one. What is
talking about TJ Maxx like I could? That's not gonna work.
You gotta get conceptual.
This is like the part of the test where you're like, oh shoot, I can't write any BS here. There's objectively truths here. All right, what is justice and what is
truly evil? You could take either angle into the question. I think it's trying to get at the same question.
Okay.
What is the transgression of justice? Again, I didn't write these questions, so don't judge me.
Wow. Well, hopefully there's not many theologians watching.
No, but it doesn't matter. And what is it to you? Like, it doesn't, like,
No.
The theologians who are lost in a classroom somewhere with their dusty tomes, we need to make it real.
Yeah,
they can stay there. And
your answer was just. Justice is I guess to me, the truth being someone finding truth, someone living out the truth and it happening for them. And, you know, the pure evil would be, I would say, getting to the point where you're, I guess, on other people would be totally being disgusted with them. Not even like beyond hate, like, but just being totally disgusted with them, where they're just existence would absolutely disgust you. So I guess you could put that towards anything and just being disgusted with anything, where it's not just hate, it's not just like a rivalry, or it's not like this, but it's like total disgust in me would be repulsed by anything that was whatever the object of my evil was.
Yeah, so it's like you don't want them to be, you don't want them to exist.
Right.
It's what this whole show is trying to push against.
Right.
Is it not cancel culture?
Right.
You're not even allowed to have a voice anymore. Yeah. You're not even allowed to speak. There's no spot for you at the table.
Correct.
You're not allowed to give your opinion. I'm so averse to your perspective that you're not allowed to have one anymore. It's very anti-American, isn't it?
Yes. It's like a desire to destroy, not just silence, but destroy.
Yeah. That's a good answer.
Yeah. No, you're right. With what you said, it's really weird. It's like free speech was such a important thing for both political parties, and now it's like you can't say what you mean anymore. Say what you want. It's you have to say that whatever the talking point is. Like, well, there's no point in really having a discussion.
I know. I grew up. For me, it wasn't that long ago. When I was in college, which it really wasn't that long ago. It was, the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. In Connecticut, in a very liberal context, part of the ideal and value of tolerance was expressed in its, I think, healthiest sense, which was no matter what your perspective is, like, you're allowed to convey it. Mm-hmm. You're allowed to convey your perspective. And the university that I went to Central Connecticut State I'm talking about my undergraduate, all sorts of perspectives were allowed to express. And that's gone. And I think it is good to bring it back. It's in the spirit of intellectual honesty. We can't get to the truth if we're not honest and I'm not willing to hear your viewpoint. And in the history of the church, we see so many different inclusions of different philosophical systems that don't line up perfectly with a Catholic theological viewpoint or a Catholic philosophy or anthropology, but we can learn from them and take parts of them and bring them in. Thomas Aquinas was built on a pagan perspective of Aristotle. His thought was built on Aristotelian thought. Mm-hmm. Right, all the way up to St. John Paul II, who's pulling in phenomenology and the experiential along with the thought of St. Thomas Aquinas. So if there's no dialogue, we can't bind the riches of a variety of perspectives to see whether or not that aligns with what God has revealed to us about himself from a theological perspective. So cancel culture and shutting people down and not wanting them to have a voice, I think
it's such a privilege to disagree with someone and work through that disagreement. That's like the truest privilege of marriage in a lot of ways, is like, hey, you get to disagree and work through that,
It's quite the privilege.
But you guys, it's just such a gift to do that in a
does it always feel like a privilege?
Yeah.
I feel so privileged that you're as wrong as you are right now. I feel so privileged to experience you just having no insight into reality. What a privilege to witness that. It's like LeBron. I'm a witness.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead.
All right. Yeah, sure. Well, it's a gift to be able to get into a deep conversation with someone and come at it with different ideas and then maybe leave with a new one. We hardly ever do that anymore. And when the early years of our friendship, I remember constantly disagreeing with you, Bryan. Like that's like we would get into conversations all the time, and I don't think we ever really had the same perspective. And it was such a fun friendship for that reason.
I think I was less healthy than I am now back then. I'd like to think that I've grown. I think I was a little bit more stubborn back then.
Me too.
How many? 15 years ago.
I was saying it as a compliment, though. It was like such a fun thing to be able to like wrestle with a new idea and have, different perspectives on it.
Yeah, it's always been because of the school experience I had, the academic experience I had. It has always been an impersonal exercise for me to discuss ideas. And what is lost nowadays is that we are connected even if we disagree.
Yes.
Our relationship can insulate any tension or disagreement between us, and we can disagree, and I'll see you tomorrow. Some of the best friendships throughout history reflect major differences in worldviews.
Right. Scalia.
Major differences.
Scalia and Ginsburg. I mean, that's my favorite Supreme Court article, is about how they were really the best of friends. Could not have been more ideologically different, and they were the best of friends.
It's beautiful because it's the experience of honoring someone's presence. Even if I disagree with you, I just love that you're here.
Yes. Yeah, because you are good. You are good in your essence. Yes.
Do we get justice in this life, or that just comes, I guess, in the next? True justice.
I mean, Scripture tells us that God says justice is His, justice is the Lord's, and we hope for justice in this life, but I don't think we get it. I mean, ultimately, justice does happen, right? I mean, our life, the choices of our life, there are consequences of the choices of our lives, but it doesn't feel that way as we're going through life.
No.
It seems there's a lot of experiences that we have that feel very unfair, and on a natural level, they are unfair.
Right.
But at the same time, like ultimately, we deserve hell forever because we're not perfect. We're not God. All of us do. And so, but God's mercy transcends His justice, and the relationality, the love that He has for us supersedes what is actually deserved. Even when we start to explore the concept of forgiveness, if someone hurts us, we have a right to be angry indefinitely.
Right.
No one is owed our forgiveness. We actually have a right for all eternity to be angry at someone until you realize that needs to be informed by mercy. And love transcends the act of, or the principle of justice. And because I love you, I'm going to forgive you and let go of the resentment that's owed to you. But when someone, when I work with people, with clients, and we talk about how someone has hurt them and there's a transgression, there's a part of them that wants that validation for being angry. Yeah, you should be mad. This was terrible that it happened to you. And if you skip that, this is very Catholic for people to skip that. Mm-hmm. They go right to Scripture,
right?
And Christ says forgive, but you're just skipping all the emotion associated with the transgression. You can't forgive if you don't recognize there's a transgression that occurred. And emotions are a response to the external experience. So the response to injustice is anger. That's the proper response. Just like sadness is the proper response to loss, or joy is the proper response to communion. So actually, in order to forgive someone, you need to be really pissed off first.
Yeah.
And that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people who want to protect their parts of themselves, that want to protect people that they love. Their parents, for example, very commonly. They want to protect their parents because they love their parents and their parents love them. They don't want to access the anger. But you can't truly forgive your parents because every parent hurt us. It doesn't have to be parents. It could be anyone that's hurt us. But you can't truly forgive them until you recognize that they've hurt you.
Right.
So, yeah, it's all connected.
That's really interesting. No, like especially when you bring it up in practice for clients, like or anyone that's dealing with it. But does it help them realize that if they have that kind of thinking, like, hey, real justice won't come until the next life, but here's the best next thing, or here's what we can offer you, and that's obviously being really pissed off and allowing that to go through, but then there's this forgiveness thing that is counter to what we know, but it's a pretty good antidote that we learned.
When you really like let that anger out, so this is like a personal thing, I guess, but I look at, and I truly mean this. This isn't me skipping over to the good part as a Catholic. Like the biggest hurts of my life, are, it sounds really cliche, but it's like there's a lot of gratitude for a lot of those hurts once you really work through them.
Yeah, well, the final stage of any kind of even relational trauma, but in the sense of capital T trauma, not just lowercase t trauma, the final stage of that is finding meaning in what occurred.
Yes.
It's writing the last page of that book to find the moral of the story. And from a Catholic perspective, we can look at how God or Christ informs our suffering with meaning. That's the beautiful gift of what we believe. But even in a secular context of someone who's not a believer, trauma work does involve finding meaning at the end of it. So if you're able to look at the ways in which you were hurt and you've worked through them, as you say, and you found why they've occurred, then yeah, that's great. That's how you move on. But there's a lot of steps along the way too. Mm-hmm. So the first step is anger, because before that, there's no anger. And what happens is people basically blame themselves for how they were hurt. They don't allow themselves to be angry. And as a child, that makes sense. Even up until you start to create, experience more autonomy in your life. Mm-hmm. Before that, you need your parents so much, so you split. They can do no wrong. How many people say oh, my childhood was great. It was perfect. Or they feel that way because they're not able to access the ways in which they were hurt. And so they go through this experience of being hurt and they're not in touch with how they were hurt. And they just basically blame themselves. They turn it inwards. And then there's this stage of wait a second, you hurt me. And that's great because it creates individuation. Mm-hmm. It separates that you from that early stage where you're blaming yourself. It's no, I'm angry. You hurt me. That's really important to go through. That stage is sustained by the hope and expectation that the person that hurt you is going to change.
Yeah, or recognize or be able to recognize that
they're not. I mean, miracles happen. Right. Miracles happen. But by and large, what keeps you in that angry stage is the hope that your parent or friend or spouse or whomever becomes the person that you need them to be. Basically become God and become perfect for you. Yeah. But once you finally accept that they're not going to change, and that's a hard thing to do, but accept it, then you start a stage of sadness. And you realize the loss of what should be. And you're not angry anymore, but you enter into what is missing from that relationship. Mm. There's this almost spirit that you have of being an orphan because you feel abandoned by the love that you should have abandoned from the love that you should have received. Mm-hmm. Right. And then you get to the final stage, which we're all hoping from a Christian perspective, which is forgiveness, which is that balance of every single stage, which is you hurt me, mm-hmm. but actually, even though you're my parent, you're whoever, you're my brother and or sister, and you're at a different stage of your own development, and you make mistakes, and guess what? So have I. Mm-hmm. I've hurt people just as badly as you've hurt me, and I can set the boundaries and see where you end and where I begin, which was learned in that angry stage. And I can be sad and hope that you grow and heal and become more filled with love. But I just love you and I can stay connected with you. And we don't always get there, but that is what it is really meant by forgiveness and true Christian love. And the difference is, say you grew up in an enmeshed, guilty Italian family where boundaries are an issue. When you're in the angry
phase, it's so hard for me to imagine.
Yeah. When you're in the angry phase, it's, Dad or Mom, don't tell me about your problems with Dad. That's not my responsibility. Leave me alone. Go work on it yourselves. Stop dumping your emotional problems on me angrily. But then when you get to the final stage, it's, Mom, just go work that out with Dad. That's not really my issue. Mm-hmm. It's still the same principle. It's still the same boundary, but there's not that emotional attachment and anger. And it's right. You learned that back here, but you're at a deeper piece. You understand that that's your mom or dad struggle to work through, and it's not your responsibility because boundaries have been formed and you're at peace with that, and you can still connect with them on different levels. So about marshals, let's get to where we can connect and you're at peace.
All goes back.
All roads lead to Marshall. I love that.
Let's talk about Catch Me If You Can.
Okay.
I want to start with Regina because Regina, this is a new film for you.
Yes.
Right? You had not seen it before Jim decided unilaterally.
I had not seen it the whole way through. I hope.
Okay.
Yeah. Because that's one of those movies that I think you see different clips of and you're like, this can't be real. Like that, no. And then like I don't know, it's like a TNT movie or a TBS movie where it's just on all the time type of thing and you catch different parts. And
it says something about the film though, right?
Yeah.
Those kinds of films, there's a reason why those films are on cable TV because they draw you in because every single part is kind of attractive and can draw you in.
Yes. Yeah, and it looks well. Okay, you asked me a question first, or I could just talk about it. But
what are your broad impressions of the experience of the film?
Okay. Well, it's it kind of strikes you as almost like a musical theater movie in a way, and that might sound really strange, but there's almost like a choreography to the scenes that makes it really. I feel like it's a crossover movie between the male and the female because there's a lot to enjoy just in like the blocking of the actors and like the colors and the music, like all of that is really highly entertaining and kind of whimsical in a way. But then there's this very deep story that's true. And you're witnessing this young man's response to trauma. And then and it's enmeshed in this like whimsy almost, but it's a very raw portrait and narrative of what you do when you're trying to run away as fast as you can from something that hurts very deeply.
Yeah. Jim, why'd you pick this film?
Surface level, I just thought it was super entertaining. It's amazing to watch someone pull off those, all those different stunts and get away with it, and just the depths to what they could go to get around the system. That would just be on the surface of it.
You like that, don't you? A part of you likes to be antisocial and thinks that rules don't apply to you.
Absolutely. And then you're like, man, I wonder if I could pull that off. Like, how can I get around the system?
There's a temptation.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's almost like James Bond. He's really skillful, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. And he even dresses up like him at one point in that movie.
I didn't even think of that when I said it. I'm glad you reminded me.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense that he's attracted to that character, doesn't it?
Right.
And it's kind of a random part of the movie. It's nothing to do with it at all. It's just like there's a little snippet in there where he just dresses up like Bond, and you're like, okay, whatever. But it matches because it's like, man, I wonder if I could do that. Could I pull that off? I think I'm pretty stealthy. I could pull that off.
When he's searching for a male archetype, like James Bond is a male archetype. He wants to find someone, and that's one.
Yeah,
it's pretty darn cool.
But then as you sit back and really watch it, it's like it's such an amazing commentary on like a father-son and how impactful that father figure can be. Like this, the movie starts off and he's like he's almost a nerd. He's like he's got his jacket on, he's like ready for school, you can tell he's an overachiever, he's brilliant. His dad even appears to be really good, and then as the first few scenes unfold, it's like dad is totally yeah, he's not what you think he is. He's totally just faking it and just is a criminal and works the system. His mom is unfaithful, and then it just shatters him. But I think the son is just looking for so much love from the dad. He just needs one good person in his life, and this guy's going to crush it in the world.
Yeah.
It's just so cool to see that the person that eventually gets him there is the guy that has to set the consequences on him.
Yes, such a good point. So the behavior of the father and the son, we would describe as antisocial behavior. Yes. People misuse that term, right? People use the word antisocial in the common tongue, in the layman's term, to describe someone who just doesn't want to hang out on a Friday night. It's like they don't want to be around people. That's not what antisocial means, right? Oh. Antisocial mean in the world of psychology, antisocial means against social norms. I am antisocial. Rules don't apply to me. And so, of course, I'm going to talk about all of this through a psychological perspective. And there's always this question mark when analyzing movies for me of whether or not something is internally psychologically consistent. Like, it's a film, right? It's not a real experience with a person. But I think it holds up. And I always love films that hold up pretty well. And I think this is one of them. It holds up pretty well in terms of psychological integrity. But the struggle with the psychological profile of someone who is weighed down by antisocial tendencies is I don't follow rules, or rules don't apply to me because I don't trust the rule giver. So you have children who don't trust their parents, and then they don't follow rules because they don't trust the rule givers. But it's interesting in this case, it's almost like between him and his dad, they're partners in crime.
Right.
There actually is an attachment between the two of them.
Yes.
Of love. So it's more modeling than anything else. But there's also a huge difference between the two of them. Dad, well, there's a lot of differences, but one big difference is Dad I don't think he has the intellect to know the rules and work around the rules. Him, it's only charm, which works most of the time until he meets the IRS.
Yes.
Like right in the beginning, the banks are like, it's not a question of, it's a question of risk. I'm not going to give you this money. You know, like you get stone cold, rational people who are dealing with money, and you can't charm them with a little necklace. Right.
Right.
But the son, Frank, the main character, Leo's character, has that, but he also knows the system. And so he dabbles in that kind of interpersonal manipulation, but he also manipulates the structures too. So there's a difference. But he always identifies. Another major difference is for Dad, it's to survive. You can think, like, to me, you start in the middle of Dad's life where everything's falling apart. But you can imagine he has years and years and years of manipulating people to get to where he was until it caught up with him. And even when he talks about the IRS, he's still living in this world of fantasy. It's like, one day they'll forget about me. The IRS isn't forgetting about you. They're coming for their money, right? But the son still thinks it's a game. He's such a child. I think you see that he's a child in a couple different instances. One, he's like, all right, Carl, he's on the phone. I call a truce. I'm ready to stop this game. Carl's like, what did you think was going to happen? You owe $4 million. There's no truce, right? That, and when he's on the airplane and and that woman, the steward is like, you want something to drink? You know, it's like this cougar, like he doesn't know it's a cougar, but this woman that's provocatively trying to seduce him, and he's like, milk? Yeah. He wants milk, right? And then I think you see it in the beautiful love I think it's real authentic love between him and Brenda.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely.
The girl, the young girl, he's talking to her about getting his braces off.
Yeah.
I love that line. He's like, Brenda, these doctors, they don't know everything. He's like really connecting with her on a young level. And he just has, and when, of course, the end of the whole film, not to jump ahead, but the end of the whole film it's a game to him. He really sobers up and changes his life when Carl Hanratty, who I want to talk about, obviously, he's amazing, says, I know you're going to be here on Monday. Yeah, Carl, how do you know that? Look behind, nobody's chasing you. The only reason, it's a child's game to him.
Right.
He's dealing in an adult world with children, which, his sentence is like, we have no recourse but to try you as an adult. I actually don't think you should have tried him as an adult.
No.
Given the immaturity of the character. Because it was just a game to him. No. What'd you guys think? What'd you think about the dad?
I love Christopher Walken. He's such a good actor. He's so perfect for it. I love his opening line: the one mice drowns, and then the other one turns and and you're like, oh, that's
2
him.
mice.
It's him.
2 mice fall into a bucket of cream.
It's so good, and it gets told. That story gets told 3 times, and then the second time it gets told, it's like it's clearly that the dad is the one drowning, and Frank Jr. is the one that's going to make the cream. But he's so well played. It's such a perfect role in the way that he plays it. And he's definitely just a schmoozer, and that's all he's got. Like you said, there's charm, and then that's it. And he just cannot live in reality. The best is one of my favorite scenes is when he's in trouble at the principal's office, and he comes out, and you're like, okay, the dad's going to yell at him. He just cracks a smile, and then there you go. There's the partnership born. Like, well done.
Yes.
You played a substitute teacher. It's amazing. And it is amazing. It's hilarious.
That's so funny.
It's funny. And it's dangerous too, right? So he becomes a teacher out of anger. That kid bullied him.
Right.
And he used his powers of persuasion to embarrass that kid. And then he just took it he did it for a week. He's planning a field trip, which is all very funny. So it talks about the danger in manipulating and controlling people. So the power of persuasion it's like Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility, which he didn't exercise because he was a child. He had no sense of consequences.
Right.
But no one is all bad. There's only one enemy. It's the evil one. Mm-hmm. Human beings have good about them. I think his very openness to his relationship with Carl, Tom Hanks' character, was because his dad loved him. You think I'm ever going to actually give up my kid?
Right.
Like, his dad loved him.
Right.
It was distorted. It was twisted.
Right.
And it was bad modeling. But he loved him. I think he really loved him.
Definitely. But he gave him a skewed interpretation of right and wrong. So sometimes when I'm looking at all the things he does he know how deeply he's manipulating people? Does he really know the magnitude of stealing $4 million? If you're 17,
no.
What does that mean?
No, you don't.
Much.
Especially, I mean, what's for a 17-year-old? What's the difference between $100,000 and $4 million? Really,
it's all paper. It's all
right.
paper.
He's not trying to pay for his kid's education.
Right.
He has no responsibilities.
Right.
So $4 million or $400 million is just, I have more money than I need.
Right. So he's just going to spend it.
Yeah. I think that it's also survival on him. And I would argue that he's less morally culpable than the dad, because the dad has the responsibility to form him in the truth. And Frank Jr. doesn't have that responsibility. He's learned what truth is from his dad, and he's trying to survive as a trauma response to being so deeply hurt.
Yeah.
Totally.
I think the last time they meet, Leo's character calls him out and like, tell me to stop. Like, just tell me to stop. All of a sudden you're going to be a dad and tell me the FBI's at me? Are you kidding me? Like, I know who you are.
Yeah.
Don't give me that crap that, the FBI's at me, you're in trouble. No, just tell me to stop and I'll stop. Like, I just want a dad and a mom.
And he can't.
All I want.
Why do you think he couldn't? Why do you think his dad could not tell him to stop? I'm a little confused by that. He's like, he can't stop.
Yeah, because
maybe because he couldn't stop.
I think so, because you're right. His line back is, where are you going? Where are you going? And it's like right back into what's the next adventure? What's the next crime or the next heist that you're going to pull off?
It's hard to say.
And it's compulsive. Even after Leo left, he left the room and the door shut. And the dad's still going, where are you going tonight? Where are you going tonight? What are you doing? It's like he can't stop himself.
Right.
No. I don't know what that is. That's a good question. What could not get him to stop? I would say I think at some point when you build habits and you go so far down a path, it's just, you can't stop.
Yeah. What'd you think about Mom?
That's a sad one.
I'm angry at her. I'm not sad yet. I'm still angry at her.
Yeah. Well, this is going to be, here's the lady coming out of me. It's almost though that I almost want to blame the dad a little bit because
say more. This is a hot take.
Well, I'm quiet.
You drink that water. he doesn't fight for her, and that's almost what Frank Jr. wants too. Like, why aren't you going and telling mom that you have a Cadillac? Why aren't you showing up to mom and fighting for her? So yeah, I think that, she's not a very good character, not a good mom. She has her priorities all wrong. But a woman needs a man to fight for her, and he absolutely does not. He lets her go into the thing that's going to destroy her and his son.
Yeah. Why do you think that's the case? Why do you think he didn't fight for her?
Well, maybe that's the compulsion in him too. Like he doesn't have a sense of anybody but himself. Like, because I think he would have set limits with his son and fought for his wife if he was pursuing truth.
Yeah. I think she was looking for, the compassionate side of me would say she was looking for security. At the end of the day, she was in this small provincial town. I have a 2-year-old girl, so Beauty and the Beast is on my mind, like this provincial kind of life. Uh-huh. She lived in a provincial town in France, France too. Yeah. And provincial life.
Like Beauty, like Belle's little square.
Does. Yeah, her song, the opening song, yeah. And she and it's like their dynamics says a lot about the fragility of Dad's ego. He kept telling the story. 200 soldiers. 200 soldiers. I didn't speak a lick of English. And I saw her and she was mine. Uh-huh. Right? And even when he's at his lowest point later on, he keeps trying to affirm himself with that story. Mm-hmm. I was the one that got her. And she ate it right up. She was just looking to get out of that town.
Right.
And so, I think Frank learned that love is earned. Love is earned, and it's earned by material possessions and wealth, which colored the entirety of the film.
Right.
He was just trying to get more money and more goods so that he can give it to his dad so he can get his family back.
Yeah, put his family back together with all the stuff, right.
But that was the at least from the mom's perspective, that is what she communicated was love. I don't know that the dad ever bought into that. I think his was just, it's about him. I think he was a little narcissistic as well as antisocial. But I think from the mom's perspective, the son intuitively knew that. She married the guy who was his friend who betrayed him, who was the other kind of big to do in the town, right?
Right.
That scene when he, at the end, one of the last scenes in the movie, when he's racing up to his mother's house and there's this new guy and he sees that nuclear family and his half-sister.
It's fake.
Yeah, and it's just like that's all he ever wanted, and this new little girl has it. And
he finally gives up then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he finally gives up.
Get me in the car. Just get me out of here. They don't even cuff him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So dumb.
Yeah, there's two scenes that are absolutely, to me, crushing. One more so than the other, but they lead into one another. The first is the affair. Mm-hmm. And when Leo enters in and you just see him, he knows. She tries to bullshit him.
Yep.
And he just sits there and doesn't say a word. And she tries, and then eventually she says, "You're not going to tell him, are you?" She realizes that she can't convince him that was not an affair.
Right.
And it was so upsetting.
And to put that in the sun, like that's the worst quality in her. That quote right there.
And he goes, "No." Mm-hmm. He says, "No, I'm not going to tell him." Because their relationship to him is paramount. It's more important than the affair and staying together. Even at that point, you see how important the nuclear family is for him and their bondedness and staying together. And then the divorce scene was devastating. Every time I watch that, I'm devastated.
Oh.
Him having to choose between two parents.
Yeah. And he
out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He runs.
And it's like the first time he's really seen his grandmother, and it's like totally uneventful, not
right
familial at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't even thought of this until now, but with the antisocial defenses that he has, rules don't apply to me. That was an experience of rules. Here's the lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Sign this piece of paper. Choose which parent you want to live with. It's very structured. It's very organized. And he's like, nah, I'm out. I'm not doing this divorce thing. And he never really accepted it. He never accepted the rules of that until much, much later. Until that scene that you mentioned where he saw the new family.
Mm-hmm.
That just crushes me. That was awful.
No.
It was really awful. And it breaks my heart to think about all the children who are in that position of having to choose between their parents and what they learn about the nature of love.
Yeah.
And the divorce is like the final stage, right? It's the manifestation of problems that existed long before that.
Right.
That children often feel but can't articulate. They don't know where the holes have come from in themselves.
Yeah.
And the divorce kind of spells it out a little bit for them. But they
so
know
upsetting.
Oftentimes.
Like the only control he has over his mom is like, I'm going to take the cigarette out and throw it away. Like that's the only thing.
Yes.
So be a woman of your word is really what that means.
It's such a great point.
Yeah. Word. Yeah.
Yeah. The cigarette. I forgot about that. It's the second time, right?
He does it 2 or 3 times to her and it really ticks him off.
Yeah.
But he's obviously more ticked off about something else, but it's his only way to get at her.
Yes.
That's like their biggest interplay between him and his mom. There's not a whole lot as much as it with him and his dad, but certainly the cigarette thing is a theme, and it's like, I can't control this in any real meaningful way, but I am going to take a little shot at your cigarette. You be a person of your word. You said you're going to stop.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about Carl Hanratty. What did you think of Tom Hanks' character, who is exceptional? I mean, he's amazing. What did you think about Tom Hanks?
I thought he was terrific too. He has boundaries though. He's definitely nerdy like Frank Jr., but he is a man of boundaries and just like, I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do.
Yes.
And I think Frank Jr. does stretch him a little bit in like realizing, okay, not everyone deserves to go to the slammer forever or deserve this ultimate justice. It's like, okay, the kid's a kid, but I'm going to get you the boundaries you need, buddy.
Yes. If Frank Abagnale Sr. believes that rules don't apply to him, Carl Hanratty is the most rule-oriented and structured person there is.
Right.
And I love when the first time Frank Jr., Leo's character, says to Carl this narrative. He shares this narrative, which is the it's almost like a maxim by which he lives his life. And he gives that story about why do the Yankees always win? The Yankees always win because everyone's paying attention to the pinstripes, which is in some ways is applicable to a lot of the manipulations that Junior and Senior were able to utilize. Right. But Carl says, no, the Yankees win because they have Mickey Mantle. It's not because of the pinstripes. It's like, he's very sobering.
Right.
He's a very sobering character. And even in all his interactions with his coworkers who want him to tell a joke, knock, knock.
Yeah.
And he's like, F you, right? He's not intoxicating. He's very rule-oriented and very sobering. And it's exactly what Frank Jr. needs.
Right. And I think Junior gives that answer because they have Mickey Mantle when he was younger and innocent.
Yeah, he does give the answer. It's the second time, right, that they mentioned Mickey Mantle. But Carl Hanratty needs Frank Jr. almost as much as Frank Jr. needs Carl.
Yeah, he's too rigid. Yeah. He's a little rigid, and he needs to He needs to color outside of the lines once in a while.
And he too lost his family. He's no longer with his mom and his daughter. So there's something to say that he needed to bend a bit.
Yeah. You're right. In our work, in what I do, one of the buzzwords at Catholic Psych is the corrective emotional experience. Mm-hmm. And that is when all of our unconscious assumptions and expectations about ourselves, about the world, about other people get contradicted by someone loving us. So that's what Carl Hanratty did to Frank Jr. So his view of the world, of everything being negotiable and manipulated, Carl comes in and he's like, what did you think was going to happen here? Mm-hmm. And so he gives rules and he gives boundaries, Jim's point, about structure and boundaries and limitations and consequences, but does so in a loving way. It's not just that. It doesn't lead to scrupulosity, mm-hmm. right? There's still the relational dimension. Every Christmas he's there. When Frank Jr. gets arrested in France, Carl's like, I'm going to get you properly extradited to the United States. Uh-huh. Like, dude, what are you talking about? This guy's getting arrested. But like, even in his rules, there's a loving dimension to it. And then he's like, I didn't want to tell you about your father until we get closer to the United States. Right. And then ultimately, the huge loving act, which is, I'll get you out of prison. I worked for years to get you out of prison because I know you're just a kid. You're just a kid. Remember they're walking up the airport at the end? Like, you're just a kid. Yeah. And then Junior says, I'm not your kid. But he was. He was though. Right. He was though.
Right. Yeah, you're not not your kid. You're not a father. What do you know?
And Bryan, that road to love for Carl evolves because at first he wants to kill the guy. Like he's just will do anything, like obsessive. Let's catch this guy. And then it becomes like, let's teach this kid. Let's form this kid. Let's get him to where he needs to be. And it's much less about himself and more about Frank.
And then he's like that father when he shows him off to his boss and to all his FBI buddies. Like,
so proud of him.
Yeah. He's giddy. Yeah. You've never seen him giddy about anything, but he's super giddy.
That's that smug look. He's like,
yeah.
Yeah. No, it's true. And I think also even from the very beginning, there was an authenticity from Frank Jr.'s perspective. In that first phone call at Christmas, Carl says, you embarrassed me. And Frank Jr. says, I'm really sorry about that, Carl. I actually didn't mean to embarrass you. Although that later becomes part of their dynamic, where when he's at the airport and he holds up the sign for someone he's supposed to meet at the airport, and Junior had taken off because he had the misdirection of using the stewardesses to escape the airport. And then Carl Hanratty comes he gets fooled by the fake Frank Jr. and he holds up the sign and he's like, who are you waiting for? And it's like Hanratty, right? So it's like still kind of like a little dig, gotcha. But still, I don't think he really wanted to. Like, it becomes playful. But originally, I wasn't trying to embarrass you. I was just trying to get out of here. That's why I gave you the fake wallet. You know, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Right.
And then ultimately, this is such a corrective emotional experience between the two of them for Frank that it becomes generalized. In my work with clients, I want to create a context in which I provide a corrective emotional experience, and I love them in a way that they've never received or need to receive. And I don't do so perfectly, but I try to participate in God's love for them. Mm-hmm. But the final phase of working with someone is what's called generalization. And so all the goodness that's occurred between the two of us, does that generalize to other relationships with other people, with other institutions, with your relationship with the world? And you look at the last closing crawl, and what was left in there was that Frank Jr. got married. He has 3 sons. Mm-hmm. He lived a happy, stable family life for 26 years. He's still with his beloved wife to this day. Like, that's what the whole film is really about, is that Carl provided for him stability and a father figure, which changed his whole perspective on the world.
Right. And he took his trauma and he went and corrected it for others. He taught others, like, this is the mind of someone who wants to do this. Let me help you protect yourself, protect your company. Like, that's what his life's work was, is to kind of make up for the manipulation and the lies of his past.
It's true. We're all given gifts, right? We are not our gifts. there's a distinction between those two things. Sometimes we fool ourselves into thinking that we are our gifts.
Right.
But I'm getting uglier, dumber, balder, and fatter by the day. So I better not be my gifts. I better exist apart from my gifts because they're fading, declining very rapidly. So, but there is a question of what do we do with our gifts? And he eventually uses them in service.
Right.
But initially it was, I mean, you could say he used them for himself, but he actually didn't. It was still in service of his family, misguided.
Sure.
But he was using his gifts out of love to reunite his family. And it's such a beautiful film.
Yeah, it's good. Good pick, Jim.
You said something about it, and I just said we got to make a decision. And it's like one of those movies that's always on.
Yeah.
Shawshank's probably on more than that one, but that's a pretty dark movie.
I'm just trying to remember the last time I turned on my TV to like catch
That's
a
true,
minute
too.
of a movie. Like that was probably 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It was always on in 2010.
Yes, exactly.
There was the one scene I appreciated, which had nothing to do with it. It's so true when you're in these meetings and there's new technology. Like they're fiddling around in the back with the overhead projector, and they can't get it to work. Oh, you hit that button. It's like no matter what the technology is, like that's so
Nobody
old.
can
But
work it.
no one knows that. Oh, hit this one. No, I do this. No,
Yeah, and that scene too. You totally. And in that scene too, you see them making fun of Carl and kind of like putting him down. Oh, you're just like a fraud expert. You're not really in the field. His coworkers were demoted to work with him, right. But then you see the progression of him in that scene all the way to when he's in the airport.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like a head honcho, and he's telling people what to do, and he's got all these agents behind him, and he's sort of a big deal. And you can tell there's a little bit of like ego in Carl's character too. It's like, how do you know that he's not in New York? Because I'm not in New York. Right. Like that's not actually rational and reasonable. No, but it's almost as if the world revolves around him and him catching this criminal.
Yes, and there's a total mockery being made of that because Frank Jr. knows it, and he just gets a bunch of pretty girls, and that's my favorite scene of the movie. And it like looks like a musical to me. It's like a total dance. That entire scene is a dance.
What a different world too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, right. I'm sure there are people today that behave in a manner similar to the Abagnale men, but it's very different. Back then, you could randomly get into a high school of all girls and come up with some story and convince them to go for a 3-month trip across the world as part of Pan Am. Like you couldn't do that today. No way. It's ridiculous.
You have to do it over social media mediums or just create this fake profile. I don't know how you would do it. Yeah. What do you do?
I just.
Where does that play out now?
You just don't.
You
pick a new way.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
It's not that, but you're right. I think it is like manipulating the rules of social media and rules of technology. And I mean, the next phase is probably AI and manipulation via AI.
Yeah.
Someone will always find a way to know what the rules are and bend them and get around them and break them. That doesn't change no matter where we are technologically, especially with our the younger generation who's growing up with the rules. For us, it's hard for us to wrap our minds around how we would break them because we're just trying to understand them. Yeah. But those kids who are being formed in that world, they'll find ways to manipulate us all.
Like our kids. This is great.
Yes.
That's good.
So thank you guys so much for coming on. I really appreciate talking with you. Is there anything you want to plug?
You and Catholic. Watch the Catholic Sinners show. I'm plugging you.
Be a mom. Be a mom. Have lots of babies. Be on boards if you can. Jim, tell us your high school. Kids in the greater Pittsburgh area, be Catholic and go to your school.
Heck yeah. There you go. Central Catholic High School.
Yeah.
The Vikings. What a great Catholic name.
That's gotta irk you as a Steelers fan.
Yeah, no, I got used to it. We changed up our symbol. It's a little different than theirs.
Yeah.
Ours is kind of like new. I don't know what that is, but whatever. That's a Viking.
Awesome mustache.
Isn't it?
It's strong. Very strong. It's a great school. All boys, Catholic high school. It's almost 100 years old, kind of in the city.
Raising strong young Catholic men who will grow up to have mustaches like this.
Yes.
That's right. That's right.
Yes.
On to victory, brave and bold, all this good stuff. That's right here.
So cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's such a fun community to be with. It's so diverse too, for as diverse Pittsburgh isn't. But it's awesome to see all these. I mean, we got kids from like 60 different school districts. It's fun. It's just watching it come together and just watching some kid try and navigate being a man and then just getting put down or pulled up or whatever.
That's cool.
So we'll plug that.
Well, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
There you go. It's great. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll have you on again.
All right. Anytime.